Luke here, bringzone.com. Today I want to cover a topic sort of near and dear to my heart because of the number of decades I've been researching and writing about the topic of whey. Going to give a little background as to who I am and my experience with whey and research on whey, and I'll put timestamps into this video at some point so you can jump ahead that if you already know about that. But I just sort of want to make sure people know that my interest in whey is not sort of casual passing thing that I'm trying to just get this out as a video that others may. So I've been a consultant to major whey and dairy manufacturers, 30 years. I was the first to write articles about whey in terms of the medical benefits, potential medical benefits, anti-aging benefits, immune boosting benefits of whey, again, in the print magazines before the internet. Yes, there was a time before the internet, and I wrote about that in magazines such as Muscle Mag International, Muscle Media, Life Extension, and so forth. So this is something I've been, at a long time. I was fairly friendly with the researcher, Dr. Bounous, who really put whey on the map. I mean, the only reason that we all know about all these benefits of whey protein and why whey protein is such a popular product today is really due to him. Now, whey protein has been viewed as a medicinal food since the time of Hippocrates. I mean, thousands of years. But he really, and then it went through a period of time where it was actually viewed as like a waste product of cheese manufacturing. But prior to that, again, we're talking several thousand years, that whey was viewed as a medicinal food and was used for sepsis and infections and that type of thing because it's immune boosting properties. But Dr. Bounous, and I'm not sure how that happened. He's passed away, but he more or less resurrected the whey as a medicinal food by doing a bunch of research, very, very elegant, interesting studies that I stumbled upon. I don't really remember how, because we're talking like early 90s here. I'm not completely sure how I started researching whey from that perspective, but because it's been so long, and I used to spend my entire afternoons, weekend afternoons especially, in the BU and Harvard medical libraries, because that was the only place you could do such research. Remember, there was no let me just go Google up or PubMed up these studies. You had to go somewhere physically. You had to go find the right journals. You had to pull those journals and go read them and all that. So it was like a lot of work, and I had stacks and stacks and boxes of studies that I would try to put into file cabinets and put them under topic and go to them when I wanted to, write articles and all that. I don't think a lot of people realize just how spoiled they are for how much work it used to take. Now, there's already good and bad, I guess, with that, because now everybody and anybody has access to the same research in a sense, which is, again, comes with its plus and its minuses. What I like to refer to as PubMed Ninjas, where they'll go, think they know about a topic, they'll go PubMed up something, and they'll pull something out that they don't really understand, didn't even read the entire study. They think it supports their position, and it goes downhill from there. So anyway, needless to say, I've been in whey and an interest in whey. I've attended the International Whey Conference. Yes, there is such a thing. I've been asked to speak as the only non-PhD, frankly, at several conferences and medical conferences over the years about the benefits of whey and so forth. So I'm not like a casual person about whey, or a Johnny-come-lately about whey, or somebody just, out to do a quick vid to make get some eyes on their vid type thing about whey. So having said all that, a topic that, again, I found really interesting, what really, again, sort of set me down the rabbit hole about whey, was the reality of undenatured whey and why it being undenatured was the key to the biological activity of whey. So those who use whey protein, are familiar with whey protein and all that, no doubt have heard the term undenatured. They're probably aware that it's essential for the biological activity of whey, but they're probably not aware as to why. Now, unfortunately, I also find that most, if many, if not most, of even the companies that sell whey and market whey don't know the answer to this question. They will, market and say we sell, undenatured whey and so on and so forth. But they probably are not able to answer the question as to why is that important. Unfortunately, so I don't know why I didn't think to do this particular video sooner, but I don't remember that. Again, recently somebody, said, "What's the difference in whey?" And I said, "Well, the key importance of a properly produced whey for, again, biological activity, and we'll get to in a moment what that actually means, is that it's undenatured and so forth." So, all right. So, biological activity, what does that mean? So, biological activity means, the protein content of whey, or any protein, but we're going to stick to whey. So, but the protein content of whey, that is 20, let's say, X grams of protein per serving, does not change with it being denatured or undenatured. It has no impact on the protein content, nor the amino acid profile. Those don't change. You're still getting the same protein content, whether it's denatured or undenatured. Now, biological activity, however, is another matter. That's what we're talking about in this particular context. We're talking about glutathione production, biological activity, as far as what Dr. Bounous' research studied specifically was the unique ability of whey protein to dramatically increase glutathione. Now, if you're not really aware of what glutathione is, its benefits to immune system and fighting cancer and fighting viruses and so forth. I'm not going to go down into that in a great deal. I mean, I'll link below the video, because the problem with this topic is there's a lot of areas I could go off onto that could take way too much time that most people are going to want to sit through. So I'm going to have to kind of curtail a lot of this and just put links below, and people can go research. But needless to say, that glutathione is an absolutely essential component of your immune system. It's the master water soluble antioxidant, and again, it is essential for pretty much across the board your immune defenses and so forth of all sorts of toxic insults and diseases and so forth. So, biological activity, though, specifically in this context, is whey protein that promotes glutathione production and those that don't. And what Dr. Bounous' early research, and I will even link one of his early papers, at least to an abstract. I was not able to find the full paper online. I'm sure it exists. It's a really good paper. I mean, all of his papers were good, frankly. You have to understand something also for science nerds like me and some scientists. So, you have you might have your favorite book or your favorite movie or whatever. Which I do too. However, we also often have our favorite papers. Dr. Bounous' papers, especially the one that I'll link to, the Undenatured Whey Protein Role of Glutathione, is like my favorite paper. I've read it, I don't know how many times, because it's just so interesting. It was so well written. It covered so much ground. It was, for me at the time, I was just like so blown away by what I was learning, that it's like my favorite paper. I have favorite papers that are like favorite books that I will reread, and I'm just was just so amazed by all that I learned. So from that early paper and such, that I learned the importance of whey protein and its effects. Again, now again, even myself at that time, I knew whey protein mostly. That whey protein was becoming popular in the bodybuilding community as an extremely high value protein with high BCAAs and high leucine content, very good as a post-workout protein and all that. And that's mostly what I knew about it at the time. And as I started to dig and started to research, did I realize that whey protein had all these other benefits completely separate from its protein content, completely separate from from its BCA and leucine and high biological value and all that. So, and that was its glutathione promoting abilities. Okay, so like I said, I know I'm going roundabout here, but there's just a lot of I'm trying to stick to the topic without going off too far into all these different directions. But as I've said many times in many articles, that whey protein is a complicated topic. It's a complex protein, and hence why I think a lot of people maybe get confused and go down the wrong directions of buying or using products they maybe shouldn't or don't benefit from as much as they should have. So as far as us being aware on a large scale, the essential aspects of whey protein being undenatured to have the biological effect to promote glutathione production, that is really from Dr. Bounous, and he published that research with various other researchers, Kamshaven and Gold, and some others. And basically, he learned, sort of actually by mistake, precipitously, which is very common in research, of course, that was only that whey protein that was produced under lower temperatures, very specific, not just specific temperatures, but amount of heat and how long it was exposed to heat and a number of other factors. Did that protein have the effects on glutathione? And then, of course, they could feed the rats protein, whey protein. They could expose them to nasty toxins like lipopolysaccharides and cancer-causing chemicals and viruses and all kinds of stuff. And the rats that were fed the whey protein had very high survival rates. And this has been repeatedly shown, since that time. Very well documented. And there are human studies too. However, again, you can't feed humans toxic chemicals and feed them whey or anything else to replicate some of those studies. But there are human studies with HIV and COVID and so forth. So he found that out basically by redoing some very elegant studies, exposing whey to different temperatures, different processing, and discovering what was the optimal processing times and temperatures, of which major industry today is well aware of. At the time, that was new stuff. Major whey companies are aware of this, know how to do it if they want to. I can't, go down the line. Every whey company, every large dairy company produces whey to know if they're, how well they follow it, how well they don't. And that's another topic, unfortunately. Okay, so we're getting around to this. What does undenatured mean in this context? So undenatured proteins, large and small, have a shape. They have what we call a tertiary shape, three-dimensional shape. They're folded, and they can be small. They can be very large. Again, within whey, there are ranging from little peptides to very large, complicated peptides. But they're referred to basically as native or conformational shape, and that is a three-dimensional shape that's all folded into itself. And if you go and look at a picture of insulin and others, you can get an idea of, these proteins are in their what they call native shape, native conformational shape. And many of them need to remain in that native conformational shape to have biological activity. Now, not all of them. You don't be fooled by, again, different. This is specific to whey. There are some proteins that actually benefit from being denatured. So again, let's just stick to whey. I've seen people or whatever, claiming, every you cook X protein, eggs or whatever, it becomes denatured. It's no good. That's wrong. But another topic for another day. Okay, so as a prize to whey, now I think a lot of companies and people that have looked into this could probably get this far and say, well, they know that part. Okay, yeah, well, undenatured means, the proteins remain in their natural shape and their conformational shape. And, you're not telling me anything I don't know. But what are you protecting? This is where we're going to get a little deep into the weeds. I'm going to explain something I have not seen anybody else, frankly, explain accurately as to what's going on here. So, okay, most people, if they were, let's say, have education, they go a little deeper, they read some papers, they saw the words undenatured, maybe they took a little chemistry and they understand, the terms, they took some biochem or whatever, and they understand the terms, tertiary shapes, native conformational shapes. But what does that mean? Okay, so here's where we're getting down into the weeds as to what are we protecting with this native conformational shape. Whey protein contains something that is either found in very small amounts in some foods or is actually quite rare in nature in general, and that is known as a glutamyl-cysteine peptide. Glutathione is a tripeptide made of 3 amino acids. Sorry, I blanked for a second there. Cysteine, glutamine, and glycine. It's a very simple peptide. Glutamylcysteine, as it implies, is glutamine and cysteine. That's two peptides, a dipeptide, and then you have to attach the glycine. So there's a two enzymatic step there to produce that. Now I'm going to link another video so as to not go down this whole rabbit hole to explain why that's important. But basically, glutamylcysteine is, like I say, it's actually quite rare in nature, and if you can find it, it's in very small amounts. Whey is about the only source that I'm aware of that you find large amounts, appreciable amounts of glutamylcysteine. So you have a two-step process to make glutamylcysteine, and then you have to attach the glycine. Glutamylcysteine bypasses what they call the rate-limiting step. Okay, now that will be explained in a further video below because I don't want to get into it. But glutamylcysteine is superior for glutathione production compared to NAC or even glutathione. Now, again, I can't fully explain how all that works. I will put videos below if you want to know why. There is NAC and acetylcysteine, which has gotten a lot of attention since COVID, and rightly so. Definitely beneficial, interesting stuff. But it is limited. It's still limited by those enzymatic conversion to attach the glutamine and then the glycine. So it is not as effective as glutamylcysteine. There is a recent study, fairly recent, a couple of years old, comparing glutamylcysteine to NAC and glutathione, and glutamylcysteine is superior, as it should, as even again Dr. Bounous found out. Now, again, a lot of people that look at Whey, even people that should know better, have made the mistake of continuously claiming that Whey's benefit on glutathione and immunity is due to its cysteine content, and that is not true. Cysteine, you can take all the cysteine you want, and you will have very, very poor, very little impact on glutathione. You can take NAC and get a better effect, but I don't think most people realize how inefficient NAC actually is for glutathione production. It's not terribly efficient. I think it's something like 10% of NAC actually gets used to produce glutathione, and again, you are on the other side of that limiting enzyme reaction to boost glutathione. Definitely better than nothing. There are some good studies on NAC. I'm not necessarily, I take NAC. Sorry, I'm bumping my own microphone. I take NAC myself, especially on days that I don't use Whey. I might not have to take Whey every day, probably 4 to 5 days a week. But on days I don't take Whey, I will take NAC. But NAC is not as efficient for increasing glutathione levels as glutamylcysteine. In fact, as far as I know, nothing is efficient as glutamylcysteine, including, again, glutathione. That's a whole other topic. I have another video. I'm sure some of you are like, well, why would glutathione itself not be more efficient, for increasing glutathione? I know it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but the body does that a lot. The body commonly, and I say this in many other videos, but the body commonly does prefer precursors to making things. It often does not prefer the full molecule, because again, you have to absorb that in digestion or even through IV. You've got to transport that through cells, through cell walls. You've got to get that through blood-brain barrier and so forth. And if you think about it from the body's perspective, it's often more used to seeing those precursors from a dietary perspective, and it is dangerous to allow large molecules through your digestion, through cell walls. You can cause, of course, immune reactions, hyperinflammation. That's also often where allergies come from and so forth. So I know it sounds somewhat counterintuitive, but it's not if you understand, again, the pathways. And the body, most cells in the body do not have a mechanism for transporting glutathione into the cell. The mechanism for producing glutathione outside the cell, extracellular, is to take the precursor and transport it into the cell and then produce what it needs. Now, and in this case, glutathione, glutamylcysteine, again, is the preferred precursor. So the body does it with creatine in the brain. That's another topic for another day, and so forth. So I know it sounds a little counterintuitive, but even IV glutathione is probably, no, definitely not as effective as glutamyl for increasing glutathione. So what you're protecting with undenatured whey, which is produced in low temperatures and under very specific temperatures and very specific time frames. Again, time and temp is the key here. And there's other factors, but we're just going to the big ones. Is that it protects these glutamyl peptides, which are disulfide bonded. So these complicated tertiary shapes, these native conformational shapes, are held together mostly by what they call a disulfide bond. And they can be fairly sensitive. They are sensitive to temperature, and they are also sensitive to mechanical stress. That is, putting them in a blender and blending the crap out of them for a long, long time and so forth. I mean, in biochem, when we wanted to look at amino acids and peptides in a machine, I'm trying to remember what the machine is. Of course, it's early. I'm still finishing my. Ooh, how dirty that is. I'm still finishing my morning Alpha Joe coffee. Anyway, HPLC. So when we wanted to see peptide spikes and amino acid spikes, we would put a protein whey or casein in a lab blender and let it blend. But it was a long time. It wasn't like, a lot of people kind of like freak out or think, if you throw some whey in a blender, your home blender, and you blend it up for like a minute or something, you've like ruined it. No, you haven't ruined it. But again, I wouldn't recommend putting whey in a blender and walking away for 10, 20 minutes. But for us to break down that protein mechanically to get those peptides and those individual amino acids for the HPLC machine, we had to let it run for a long time. I don't remember how long, but I don't know, it's probably an hour or something. So anyway, back to this. So what we are protecting by Undenatured specifically to retain biological activity, to get glutathione production, because there's a lot of other things I could talk about, is we are protecting these rather sensitive glutamyl cysteine peptides and their disulfide bonds. I know that's a mouthful. You can see I was even stuttering a little myself there. And that, my friends, is the key aspect of undenatured whey, and why denatured whey does not have the biological activity in whey. So, and I have not seen it explained that way correctly, quite specifically based on the early papers by Dr. Bounous from all those years back. Now, understandably, this is going to generate some questions such as, well, Will, how do I know if I am getting the best undenatured whey, the most undenatured, properly produced whey? And the answer is, I don't know. I wish I could tell you. There's no way to know by looking at a can. There's no way to know by looking at the marketing stuff on websites. Obviously, the vast majority of companies that sell whey are buying it in bulk, from the major manufacturers. I can certainly say that the major manufacturers of whey are, well aware of this. They may or may not be always aware specifically what we're talking about, glutamyl cysteine peptides per se, but they know absolutely from Dr. Bounous' research and what happened, decades on, as to how and why to produce undenatured whey if they want to. So it's not like this is some sort of secret. I promise you that. But I wish I can't tell anybody. I wish I could say, here's how you know if you've got, undenatured whey, one brand versus brand. And that's a problem. It gets even more problematic if it's instantized, and most of it is instantized. Now that instantizing should not by default do any harm to the whey. There's a little discussions there. But my understanding is that, from talking to dairy scientists stuff, that it's done to low temperatures. It shouldn't do any major damage. Shouldn't. That's the magic word. Now, again, has this been studied? Has there been any actual head-to-head studies of instantized whey versus non on glutathione levels in animals? Not that I'm aware of. I think somebody should do it. There's while there's a lot of research on whey, to be sure, and there's also a lot of research that could be done and should be done. And when I do consulting work for some of these large dairy companies, this is my advice to them every time. I'm a big believer in generating data and research, because besides my own curiosity, I also happen to know, of course, that it's profitable. I mean, if you publish good research, you get, it generates income onto itself and pays for itself and then some many times over. Um, but my advice is, like I say, to companies is, there's still plenty of questions to be answered with Whey. And I think by answering those questions, with data, it benefits everybody, including the company doing it. But again, I just came back from a major show called Supply Side West, which is the biggest show of its kind on the supply side, obviously ingredients, where, I was talking to the science people and engineers and all that in these companies. And I'm sort of fresh, in my mind about how, when we sit down and talk about, well, what are the things, you recommend, Will, that we could do, regardless of the way we're talking about all kinds of products I talked about there, but and this is always some of the advice I give, and more companies are getting better about it, coming around to it. Research is expensive, but it does pay for itself and then some. That much I can say with with confidence and authority, and I've seen it and I've done it. I've set up clinical studies for companies, and not one of them has ever come back and said, "Oh, geez, what a waste of money that was, Will. I wish we'd never done that." Never. So that's so. Let's say back to the Whey company, large Whey manufacturers, dairy. They know how to make, or they know what it takes to make, should I say, high quality, undenatured Whey. Whether they all do it, I don't know, because I haven't been to their facilities and I haven't seen the test. Like I said, if it's instantized, with most of it is, that causes an issue. Not that it may damage the Whey as much as it one of the ways that Undenatured was tested, quite simply, was how soluble it was in water. That's one of the ways that Bounous wrote in his papers to test the level of denaturation of the protein, was to mix it in water. And of course, any instantized protein is going to mix really easily in water. That was the entire purpose. So it could be like horrifically undenatured, yet mixing really well in water. Now, there's much more complicated ways of looking, have to start looking at, you have to get into molecular levels of testing, which is expensive and complicated, but can be done to see how undenatured these proteins are. But it's not that simple. So that's something I also have to look into a little bit. So, we're almost at 30 minutes here, and I swear I was trying to cut to the chase to all the important stuff here, but, entire books could be written about this, and I could go on for quite a bit. So that is why undenatured Whey specifically is important. This is why you hear it, the term gets thrown around a lot. Again, some proteins don't benefit, from being undenatured. Some actually benefit from being denatured. Egg protein is one of them. When you cook egg protein, you denature it, and actually improves the absorption and digestion of egg protein. So don't get caught up in the terms denatured and undenatured, as it would apply to every protein. With we really are talking about Whey protein. So the other things about Whey. So let's one last few things here. Thing about Whey, though. So when you narrow Whey down to like glutamylcysteine, that is the key aspect of its glutathione promoting capabilities. But Whey is a medicinal food. Okay, it's not something you can narrow down to just this amino acid and that peptide. Whey is loaded with various bioactive peptides. Besides that, and not even bioactive peptides. For example, recently there's been a couple of interesting studies where they combine NAC and glycine, and got some really interesting results, which they attributed, I think, mostly to the addition of the glycine. Now, glycine normally, has never really been viewed as that important. That is, glycine is not rate limiting to the production of glutathione. The rate limiting amino acid generally is cysteine. Usually, we don't look at glutamine nor glycine as being limited supply. Usually, there is more than sufficient amounts of glycine in your body to make glutathione, and so we don't usually tend to get real concerned about, don't consider it rate limiting. However, I'm starting to rethink glycine at that level a little bit more, in that, as we age, there is data showing that as we get older, we do produce less glycine, because you can produce glycine from other amino acids de novo. And there are probably certain disease conditions, medications and so forth, that probably can dramatically reduce glycine production, which leaves us basically mostly at the mercy of ingestion, dietary glycine. And there may be certainly cases and times, depending on the population, where between the reduced production of glycine and maybe not enough dietary glycine to get sufficient glycine to optimize glutathione production. So I'm actually encouraged by the studies. The problem with those studies specifically is they did not have a NAC only arm. And what I'm saying about that is, to know if the glycine helped or it was just the NAC, you need a NAC only. You got to have, let's say you have the NAC and glycine arm, and you have the NAC only arm. And obviously if the NAC and glycine arm has additional glutathione, well, the glycine helped. That's really the only drawback of those studies. But all it really says, like I say, I've had a little bit of a rethink on glycine. I've actually been adding some glycine to some things that I'm eating lately, because I'm post 50, considerably post 50. But again, back to whey. Well, what does whey contain? Glycine. Whey is a whole protein. It supplies a good dose of glycine. It also has glutamine. So again, you kind of have this perfect package of, even if you're one of the people, let's say, who is doesn't produce sufficient glycine, or maybe in your particular case, your age, disease state, whatever, glycine is a rate limiting amino acid to your glutathione, you're covered. So and going down even to bigger ideas, completely separate from glutathione, whey is full of, like I say, bioactive peptides. One in particular that has been fascinating to me, I've been writing about for almost 30 years, is lactoferrin. Lactoferrin is truly an impressive peptide found in very small amounts in whey. We're talking about antiviral, antibacterial, immune support, and so on and so forth. Lactoferrin is a completely separate topic, but that's just one of dozens of bioactive peptides. And I will, if you want to read about lactoferrin specifically, I'll put another link underneath there. Whey has ACE2 inhibiting peptides, which will lower blood pressure. There is some ACE2 inhibitors were actually used during COVID, because the route at which the COVID virus got into cells and started to replicate was through the ACE2 receptor on cells. So, and whey has peptides that have not even studied yet. So even what I don't like to do is, though I concentrated so heavily on this one little point of glutathione and glutamylcysteine peptides and so forth, I really don't want people to lose the big picture on whey as a medicinal whole food, of which offers all these other things that haven't even gotten into this conversation, of which, like I said, we could take hours, days, courses to talk about. So even that one little aspect, the undenatured aspect, may also impact some of these other bioactive peptides. Also, it may still be beneficial for whey to be undenatured to some of these other peptides, but specifically what we know, what Dr. Bounous studied, that he was particularly focused on, was these glutamylcysteine peptides that were found predominantly in a couple of subfractions, alpha-lac, I believe, and some others, and in their conformational state, preserving these sensitive disulfide bonds. Okay, I hope that answers the question. Leave some comments below, and I'll see you guys on the Brink Zone. And of course, like this video, subscribe, and all that. And I'll see you all on the Brink Zone.